Hello and welcome to On the Irregular with me, Java Beret, a podcast where I chat to women from all walks of life about their own unique creative journey, how they got here, how their story has shaped their creative work, what they've learned, what has helped them, and where they plan to go from here. It's an irregular journey for so many of us, and I'm delighted to offer a platform to share these fascinating stories and wells of wisdom. In this episode, I chat to interior designer, diversity consultant, Instagram influencer, and location house host, Natasha Landers. I first came across Natasha when I spotted her magnificent yellow kitchen floor on Instagram and instantly fell hook, line and sinker for her sense of style, both in her home and her dress sense. I'm not the only one who noticed. So did 14,000 other followers on Instagram, Harper's Bazaar magazine, Stylist magazine, Reclaim mag, and The Modern House. Born in Hackney, Natasha ended up at a uni in Wales studying a degree she still cannot understand the purpose of. We talked about how she finally came to accept that interior design is her calling, how dancing in her kitchen got her through lockdown, imposter syndrome, the loneliness of being a freelance creative, and how the incredible yellow floor came about. Welcome to my chat with the interior design and style queen, Natasha Landers. Oh, lovely to see you. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm recovering from sinus surgery, so I might sound a bit nasally because I am.
Are you in pain?
Sometimes it's a bit sore. It feels as if it's worse. It feels like I've been punched repeatedly in the nose. At its best, it's like when you've banged your nose because you've got big glasses on.
Oh, thank you so much for agreeing to talk to me. I, of course, know you from your beautiful Instagram account, Until Lemons Are Sweet, and your incredibly unique and colourful home and your work in interiors. And I'd really love you to talk to me a bit about your journey and how you've got where you are on your creative path. And I kind of think what I find always really interesting is to just start at the beginning. So are you a Londoner?
Yeah, I am. So I was born in East London in Hackney, which is still where my heart is, although my pocket can't stretch to Hackney anymore in terms of how expensive it is. So yeah, I started life in Hackney. I was born in what was then called Mother's Hospital. And as a nod to gentrification, it then became flats at one point. And yeah, that's happened to a lot of buildings in Hackney, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's where I started. I grew up on a council estate in Hackney. And Hackney's always been a borough in London of extreme poverty, living right next door to wealth. So there are certainly parts of Hackney which have always been more expensive. So things like de Beauvoir and Victoria Park, those sorts of Stoke Newington, but you always have lots of council social housing around as well. So there was always that was always there, but it's even more so pronounced now, I would say.
What was your family like?
So I grew up with my mum and my stepdad, who has been my father since I was 2, really. So I refer to him as my father. So I grew up with them for 10 years, and then my brother came along when I was 10 years old. We lived in a block of flats, and then we lived we then moved to some new build housing on an estate, a quite small estate in Hackney. And it was a really nice family dynamic. What I didn't realize was that we weren't poor, which sounds really odd because my parents worked very hard, very working class background. And I remember that my mum used to buy once a week, we'd have corned beef.
Mm-hmm.
Corned beef and rice, which I just thought was a Caribbean thing. But actually, my mum told me many years later, that's because we couldn't always afford to buy meat. But I didn't know that. So they were very good at it. Just everything felt very normal to me. I didn't feel at all deprived or anything like that.
That sounds very warm and safe.
Very much so, and very encouraging.
Yeah.
not pushing, but encouraging of education. I
Yeah.
think I was really spoilt as well. But I was a good child, so so just a very encouraging, very warm, dynamic, and growing up in that very working class environment of knowing that you have to work hard.
Mm-hmm.
And also being Black and working class means you have to work doubly hard to get what you want. But yeah.
Did that manifest in the way you were at school?
Yeah, I think so. Definitely not just even at school, but even throughout life, there is that. Um, it's funny, I sometimes say, right, because obviously now I'm more of a middle class income, the way that I live, but core to who I am is that working class girl from Hackney. And so sometimes when I get into debates or arguments with people, and it goes a little far, and I say, well, I can do it the middle class way, or I can do it the Hackney way. Which way would you like me to do it?
That's a good weapon to have.
So I do appreciate actually being able to straddle both sides of the social class system, because
Yeah.
it works for me. It means that when I go into spaces where working class or Black people are not used to being in, I feel I own those spaces, which you should do. I mean, I've gone to, like nice trendy cafes or things, and sometimes I've gone in with friends and they're like, oh, I don't know if we fit in here, and I'm like, yes, we fit in here. That's exactly where we fit in. So I think it helps having both of those kind of backgrounds, actually.
Yeah, I can understand that. And so, growing up, did you have any sense or idea of what your future might look like creatively or professionally, life-wise?
It's a really good question, because I think I always knew I was creative. I didn't feel it was an option to make creativity my full-time job or a career. And that wasn't because I had a family that said, you've got to get a good degree. Well, they kind of did say you have to get a good degree, but not that they said you can't be creative. But I just felt that what you do is you go to polytechnic or university, you get a degree. It doesn't matter what the degree is, and then you get a good job. So that creativity was always there. I was always into interiors from a very, very young age, and my mum encouraged that as well. But I just never considered that that could be a role for me. First, it was I was going to be a lawyer, and then I realized how much work it's not to be a lawyer. And that the statistics were quite low for women lawyers, so that helped to create that laziness that said don't bother with that one. So I ended up I didn't do very well when I first did my A levels, and so I went to college to take another A level, and then I went through would it be the UCAS system to look for universities, and I also had this, I don't know, this romantic vision of going somewhere really far away. Not because I didn't like where I was, but that's what you do if you went to university.
Yeah.
And I ended up in Wales, in the valleys of Wales.
Wow.
Yeah.
From Hackney to Wales.
But can you imagine? Culture shock, right? So inner city, urban, Hackney, with noise and pollution and diversity and all that wonderfulness, to the valleys of Wales where there was no noise at night. And I actually had to get used to that there was no sirens, just no car noise, people talking. Yeah, so it was a real culture shock for me. It took a long time actually to get used to. I almost dropped out in my first year because it was just so different. And it was very much lacking in diversity.
I was going to say, I imagine it must have been very white.
It was extremely white. I often talk about in my diversity work about being the only Black in the village, which wasn't quite accurate, but wasn't far from accurate.
Yeah.
And, some of the other Black, I didn't experience this obviously myself, but some of my Black friends who were there at the time had run-ins with the locals where they'd had to run into the university. They'd been called names.
Okay.
I didn't experience that personally, but I was very aware that I was in a minority where I was. So for me, what worked was moving to Cardiff. So I was in Pontypridd, In fact, I was in a place called Treforest in Pontypridd, which was in the valleys of Wales. So I moved to Cardiff and I commuted in every day to
Mhm.
uni from Cardiff, which is like 15, 20 minutes on a train, which was fine by me. But it gave me a sense of city, and I moved to someone was illegally subletting their council flat at the time, which all feels very nostalgic, but was completely illegal. And up to now my parents don't know that I actually lived in an illegally sublet flat, but it was great. It was on a council estate. It was very mixed. It's in a place called Butte Town, which
Mhm.
is also known as Tiger Bay.
Mhm.
When I've gone back there now and realized how poor that estate is,
Right.
how very poor. But at the time, it just felt like home. Everyone was really friendly. I had a cousin who lives in Wales. I have a cousin who lives in Wales. And when he found out I was moving to Butte Town, he was like, no, you can't move there. It's a really bad area. I was like, mate, I come from Hackney. I'm cool. And
Yeah.
it's true, on the way to the station in the morning, that, it's where it was the red light district. So you had, prostitutes out in their underwear, but it was all cool. It was, I was 19.
Yeah.
So,
So when would this have been?
so it was 88, 89.
Okay.
I think about 88, 89.
Okay.
And at the time that I was living there, they were just doing up the Bay Area to, that kind of regeneration of
Yeah.
it. And so it was looking very, from the council flats, and I lived in a tower block, it all looked very fancy. But I always used to wonder, when people move into those luxury apartments and they look across, it's not looking very fancy on the other side, because they
Yeah.
didn't invest in the side that I was in. But
Mm.
yeah, kept me grounded, actually,
Mhm.
being in
Mhm.
that space. Yeah.
And how did you find the course that you're doing? Was it public administration?
Administration. I still can't even tell you what that is.
I had to Google it. I'm not.
Well, probably know more than I do, because all I know is I was bored. I was bored. It was a 4-year course, 1 year placement year, which was back in London.
Mhm.
It was the most boring thing I've ever done.
Oh my
But
God.
I did it because I thought I needed to have what sounded like a good degree to have. I had no idea what my career would be, but I know that would, well, I assumed that would make a good degree. So I think it has something to do with local government. You could
Love
tell
that
me more.
you spent 4 years.
Really, I don't know. And I got a 2-1 as well.
Oh my God.
I'm not sure how. No, I did work really hard to get the 2-1. But I was bored. I was really bored. And I had a flatmate that did communication studies, which was felt to be a very airy-fairy kind
Mm.
of thing. But it sounded like a lot of fun to me. And I'd say to any young people considering, or anyone considering university, do what makes you enjoy. Unless, of course, you want to obviously train to be a doctor, or,
Mhm.
an accountant or an architect, or any of those things that needs it. Do what makes your heart sing,
Yeah.
so that you walk into there, you are eager to learn and all of that kind of stuff, because no degree guarantees any job these
Yeah.
days, does it? So
So true. So true.
I wish I'd known that as my younger self and started to explore more my creativity.
Because you said earlier that you never saw creativity as an option as a career.
Mm.
Do you have an idea of why that is?
I think I grew up in an era where creativity was seen, well, you just didn't really talk about creativity, actually. It
Mhm.
was, and I think growing up on a council estate in a working class background, the way out was to have a good degree and have a good job. And a good job could mean working for the council, right?
Yeah.
Or which I did for 15 years. I ran a domestic violence service in the council,
Mhm.
or working for the civil service or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah, because I guess so creativity could be seen as unreliable or just not
Yeah.
substantial enough.
Yeah, how are you going to make money from creativity?
Yeah.
Who's going to take you seriously from create? It all sounds so bizarre as I'm talking to you about it now. But at the time, in my head, and again, it had nothing to do with my parents, because I know there were some parents who were like, you need to get a good education, you need to get a good degree. They were never, ever even subliminally saying, I just never talked about I never talked to them about my creativity. I'm sure they could see it. But yeah, it just wasn't an option.
Yeah, yeah. And so, but you clearly, like you said, you were really into interiors from very early age,
Yeah.
which is quite an interesting thing to be into from an early age.
Yeah.
To be seeing your space in that way. Because I often think that like children often kind of zone in on small areas, but with interiors, it's vaster, it's bigger, isn't it? You're really looking outwards.
Yeah, I think a lot of it was influenced by my mum. And her sense of style. She has a real great sense of style, and she doesn't follow any kind of rules per se. She just, what she likes is what she likes. It's really interesting because I just did a stories on Instagram around trends that you don't like and wish would go away. And it's caused so much controversy. People are coming for me in the inbox. I'm like, and I've had to say, honestly, it's a bit of fun. Do you? And I don't mean that in a passive aggressive way. I honestly mean, if you like it and it suits your style, then do you. But my mum was never like that. So when I was growing up, and you're too young to know this, but you'll probably know it now because I think it's become a bit of a trend again. Flock wallpaper. So like velvet to the touch, sort of etched wallpaper.
Yes.
I know. Yes, I know exactly what you mean.
Yes,
used to be in a lot of pubs, which my mum hated, and she's like, why would I have something that's in a pub in my house? But in Caribbean households, it was, you'd made it if you had flock wallpaper everywhere. And it was like this sort of burgundy red. If you were really snazzy, you'd have it in green. But my mum was like, nah, that's not for me. So she didn't have what I saw in some of the more traditional Caribbean households. So she didn't have like doilies, or she didn't have things out for best. So I remember my mum's friend, she had 2 living rooms. So she lived in quite a big Victorian house. And there was one that was for best, which children never were allowed into at all, be found in there at your peril. And then there was just one that was casual. I'm not even sure if they ever used the best one. Everything was pristine. And my mum was like, well, firstly, we lived in a council house. So if we were using the living room for best, there would be nowhere to be sitting. But but she was like, these are my good plates. I'm using them. So what am I waiting for? So she was, I think, definitely very much a renegade in terms of what I saw around me. So I was very much influenced by her. And I remember the first room I decorated, or I had influence in decorating, was my room when we moved to our council house from a flat. And it was chocolate brown. Remember, I was 10 at the time, actually, not 9, 10. Chocolate brown walls with a feature wall of a wallpaper by a company called Dolly Mixtures, which I don't even know if it exists anymore.
So you were doing feature walls back then?
Feature walls.
Wow.
Yeah. So from the age of 10, that's where that started. And because I hadn't, as the years went on, I hadn't chosen it as a career, even thought about it as a career, but I was doing it for other people.
Right.
So friends would be like, oh, could you do my kitchen? Could you do my living room? Could you do a feature wall in my office? So
and they would give you free reign to design.
They saw what I did, and there was a time, an era. Here's the thing around trends. I can't remember. I would have been so this would have been maybe 30 years ago. There was a trend around was it sponging?
Sponging. Oh, my mum was very into sponging. Yeah.
Okay. Right. So that was my forte. I did a really good sponging.
It's not layering. Easy. It's really not easy. It's a skill.
It is. So I remember doing that in an ex-boyfriend's office as a feature wall, in his mum's home, in my house, somewhere else as well. Yeah. Sponging.
Yeah, we had several sponged walls. I remember them well.
So yeah, that's how I got that's how the creativity came out, in ways where I could express it, and people loved what I did. So it wasn't like, oh, I want you to do this, this, and this. It was, I like how you do those walls. Or could you give me an idea of what I could do with my children's bedroom?
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Wow, so you were essentially a consultant
Yeah,
for your
it's not
friends, for
paid.
just not paid.
Food and
Wow,
drink.
you're lucky friends.
Yeah.
And so did you I imagine you must have also expressed that wherever you were living.
Yes. Yes. So the going back to Butte Town, that sublet flat in
Mm.
Butte Town, a friend of mine, no, sorry, not just a friend, but my flatmate who I moved in with brought with her a lot of sort of cane furniture.
Oh yeah.
And I remember designing the living room around that, the furniture, and yeah, just interior designing it. And before I lived there, the house that I lived in Pontypridd in Treforest was a shared house. And it was a landlord that thought, I'm not spending any money. Anything I can get cheap,
Hmm.
whether it goes or not, that's what's going in the house. So in my little room, the walls were blue, the carpet was green, the curtains were red.
Oh my God.
I mean, it was a monstrosity. And I was like, mate, I know you're trying to save money, but come on now. I know we're students, but really? And so I said to him, would you mind if I repainted the walls? And he's like, yeah, that's fine. It's fine. As long as you don't want me to spend any money. I said, no, I don't
Exactly.
need to spend any money. So I repainted the walls white at the time, and I think I got some cane blinds, some really cheap cane blinds. I bought some art and put that up on the walls. So actually, yeah, I've really been into art from a long time ago. And in fact, there's a piece that I bought for that room that I still have in my bedroom here.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you're a big collector, aren't you?
Yeah, I love to collect art. I particularly collect art from Black artists and featuring Black subjects because I want to have around me things that represent me
Yeah.
and that I can relate to. And I just love the art anyway. Yeah, so
Wow, so that's been a common thread throughout your life then.
yeah, and I just as I'm speaking to you, it's now I'm like, yeah, I've always actually bought art.
Hmm.
And not just like, posters that you might have got from a magazine and stuck them up with some blue tack. I mean,
Yeah.
really kind of thought about what do I want on my wall.
And that's unusual from a young age because I always think of art collecting as something you kind of acquire as you get older and
Yeah.
put more thought into it. But to be that young, like you're saying, when you're at uni and already starting.
Yeah. And it wasn't until, to be fair with you, it wasn't until maybe 3 years ago, one of my best friends said to me, you're an art collector, right?
Mm.
And I'd never spoken about myself in that way before. And then I looked around the house, I thought, flipping hell, I am.
Yeah.
Not that that's a
Yeah.
bad thing, but
Yeah. I wonder because I guess I have an idea of what an art collector is in my head that I'm
yeah.
now that you're saying that I'm thinking, oh yeah, it's an old white man with grey hair who's
Right.
got loads of money and lives in a big estate house.
Yes.
And that's
Yes.
so inaccurate. But
Yeah.
yeah, we do
Yeah.
have these kind of ideas of what. But no, you're definitely an art collector. I
And
love seeing.
maybe that's a point of, that I didn't see myself when I pictured an art collector in my head. Maybe that's what I did picture was an old white man with lots of money.
Yeah.
And actually to collect art, you don't have to have lots of money because you can collect art from people who are just starting out.
Hmm.
So I've just bought a piece from a new artist and it's an original piece and it's £150, which is
Wow.
not a lot of money
No.
at all for original pieces of art.
Yeah.
So I've spent that. I've spent more money than that. I've spent money on high, not high prints, what are they called? Like really good quality prints.
Yeah.
So you can do that as well. So there is a budget for anyone around collecting art, I think.
Yeah, it's true. That's so true. I've got a few charcoal drawings from Layla Harris, who I spoke to for the podcast for the last season, and I swept in there as soon as they went up on sale. I was like,
Yeah.
I know that these are going to be so much more expensive in like
Right.
literally a year's time,
Right.
and they are prized possessions. So yeah, you can kind of like if you are aware and following and exploring, looking for people, there is a way, isn't there? Of
Absolutely. And so going to like even local art fairs, or where
yeah,
where you may get local artists, or I found a lot through social media as well. And these are people who are just starting out. And I think there's sometimes a snobbery around you need to buy something that is from someone that's well established.
yeah,
Well, that's often beyond the reach of ordinary folk, right? But that doesn't mean that buying from someone who isn't established doesn't make them a great artist. They're
yeah,
still great
exactly.
artists, they're just not established. So yeah, you just made me think also in as an art collector, it's also with an eye that this piece may be worth something more,
Yeah,
is
yeah,
likely to be worth a lot more in the future.
yeah,
So I've done that with some of my pieces, like, okay, I've spent a bit more money, but actually it's still not as much as it would be worth now.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No, exactly. And so you going back to so you were working for the council in domestic violence unit, did you say?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then and then how did you then you moved into working as a diversity consultant?
Yeah, so I worked for the local authority running a unit for about 15 years. Well, not all, I worked there for 15 years and I ran it for maybe about 4 or 5. And part of the work, if anyone works in local authority will know, is that often you have to be a jack of all trades. So my job description when I first worked there was an advocate for women, a counsellor, a multi-agency representative, and a multi-agency trainer.
Wow.
Now, all of those things are very unique skills
Yeah.
and unique skill sets. So to expect all of that from one person is a lot.
Yeah. That's a
And
lot of hats to wear.
it is a lot of hats to wear. But one of the things that I liked, besides obviously advocating and supporting the women, is the training aspect. And I had to design and deliver multi-agency training, which the unit then became not just domestic violence, but racial harassment
Hmm.
and dealing with homophobia as well, homophobic harassment.
Hmm.
So I had to train multi-agencies around it, and I loved it. It was kind of like my stage. Again, it's that creativity part of being able
Okay.
to develop and do stuff like that.
Hmm.
But the higher up I became in the organization, the less I was able to do that face-to-face stuff, and the more I was doing just being in meetings and writing policies, which was not something that interested me. And I thought it's time for me to leave and to explore doing something a bit around the same line, so around equity and justice, but maybe in a different way. And I remember when I told people that I worked with and friends and family I was leaving the council, they were mortified. They were horrified because no one leaves a good job.
Hmm.
They're like, you know how much leave you get and how much money you earn. And
Yeah.
it's all, and I said, look, since I've been at the council, there've been 5 restructures. So nothing is permanent and it's
Mhm.
time to move on. And that's where I went to work for an equalities consultancy. So in the private sector, and that was the other thing when I told people it was the private sector, you're going to work in the private sector. Like, yeah, I am. And I've never been back to public sector. So yeah, so that's how I got into working in purely around diversity. So I was developing workshops, running workshops. All at that time, it was all around the country. So I traveled quite a lot, working mostly with the public sector, health service, that kind of stuff. And I loved it.
Mhm.
I really did love it. And then from there, it just got to a time where it was just time to move on and do something different. So I went to work for the mayor's office running a program called Diversity Works for London. which was aimed at the private sector. So it was business support for the private sector around diversity. I was really thrown in at the deep end with that one, because what they hadn't told me when I went for 2 interviews was that the project was about to lose its funding.
Oh my God.
Right. So when do I find this out? The first day I arrived. Now, funding is not something that I am skilled at. This wasn't what they told me. They told me about running this program. I said, yeah, I could do that. But I then had to liaise with finance, with legal, with other teams within what was then the London Development Agency, to convince them that this project, which had been hemorrhaging millions of pounds, that they should somehow give it a second chance.
Jesus. And did you secure it?
I did. I secured it. And then you know what happened?
Wow.
The Tory government came in with a Tory Lib Dem thing.
Yeah.
And then they got rid of all development agencies. And so it so I got the funding, and then yeah. But it continued in a sort of a similar vein, but it went to the GLA, and I left to start my own consultancy.
Okay.
In fact, I was supposed to start my own consultancy, and then I was pulled in to working with a women's organization called Eves. And Eves was there to support women experience any kind of abuse or exploitation. And it had lots of different projects. So it had projects dealing with women that had been sex trafficked. It had projects dealing with women who experienced domestic violence. It had a research program, all sorts of things, charity. And charities at the time were losing lots of funding. So they asked me to come in and help them to kind of reform, which was not my skill, I have to say, but I did very well.
It sounds like you've done a lot of things where you've said, yeah, that was not my skill, but I did really well. Like, start university, securing funding, this.
That's true. Do you know, again, when you don't sit to pause about it. So I became the director of resources there, and they asked me to come in. I think originally it was for 3 or 6 months, and I stayed for 1.5 years. And at one point, the chief exec became quite ill, so I stepped in as the chief exec for a little while, until I decided it was time for me to move on. Yeah. So yeah, I sort of land into different things in a way, and then my skills are tested, or I learn something new.
Yeah. Which is quite a creative brain in a way, adapting and pivoting and kind of like looking at something that's like, right, okay, how can I tackle this? What can we do with this? That makes sense.
Yeah, it does actually. When you put it that way, it does make sense. And I love to do that kind of thing, to look at things in a different way, in a creative way, that perhaps other people wouldn't be as confident in exploring.
Yeah.
Because it's not the way that we do things.
Yeah. There's not just one linear way. We can approach it from different angles.
Yeah. And that's very much the way, in terms of the diversity work that I do. I work with quite influential people, so they're quite senior. They're often very big businesses, and I suppose the thing that I face the most is the fear of doing something different. For them, the fear of doing something different, although they want to, they're still scared about it. So being able to be creative is quite important. Even around diversity work, is to understand that, well, difference can bring benefit to your business. So even then, it's funny because I think originally I wouldn't have thought about it as being creative, but it is in lots of different ways. And even in the ways that I put together workshops is very creative. I just started working with Theatre Forum around developing, and I'm loving that as well as a new skill.
This episode is sponsored by the illustrator Saba Lachey. Now based in London, Saba was born and raised in Tehran, later going on to study interior design in Dubai, which makes her irregular journey feel even more perfect to be featured on this podcast as a sponsor. Thank you, Saba. Saba's detailed hand-drawn illustrations are a celebration of life and all the small moments that touch her personally. Observations, random conversations, books, love, loss, and music all find their way onto paper, where she creates worlds that evoke nostalgia and a tenderness for life and humans, often with a gentle humour and always an incomparable sweetness. Her talent is a potent mix of skill, technique, and an ability to see the beauty in the everyday. You can find Saba's work and get in contact regarding commissions by heading to sabalachey.com and on Instagram at sabalachey. So, when it comes to your house and like how you present it to the world, did this shift because of Instagram, or had you already been thinking for a while, right, you know, I want to focus on interiors, this is where I want my energy to go?
Before I started Until Lemons Are Sweet, I was in a marriage where I was co-running a shoe and lifestyle brand.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of my time, most of my time and energy was on that. So I was doing my diversity consultancy. I was running this as well, the lifestyle brand, and there just wasn't space for me to concentrate on the house. And I really wanted to concentrate on the house
Mm-hmm.
and my interiors because it's something that I've always put on the back foot. And I think for me, I realized that I was often in relationships where I was supporting mostly creative men actually with their dreams and putting mine on hold.
Yeah.
So that's something through therapy I've had to work on, to stop putting my dreams on hold around that. So when the marriage was over, and I think and lockdown happened at the same time, really, I started to rearrange the house quite a lot. Lots. When I think about it, I've done so many changes to the house in the last few years. And I think that was part of just kind of decluttering, moving on, you know, making the house my space again. But it was also an opportunity for me to say, right, let's now focus on what you keep putting off,
Mm-hmm.
which is interiors. And my therapist was like, you're an amazing interior designer. This is your calling. When are you going to put energy into it? And she was right, because I had lots of excuses about it. And so I started to be more present on Instagram, particularly. I have a Facebook page, but if I'm honest, I don't spend as much time on Facebook as I do Instagram. So I started to put more energy into it, taking lots more photos, you know, talking through some of my design concepts, and I started to get a following. And then one day I got a direct message in my inbox from Harper's Bazaar,
Wow.
which I thought was kind of bizarre. And at first I thought, yeah, you're not really Harper's Bazaar. Why would Harper's Bazaar be sending me a message? And they're like, really love what you do. We'd like to feature you in Harper's Bazaar. I was like, no, this can't be right. So I sat on it for a moment because I thought, yeah, I don't know. But it was. It was. And I remember she said, oh, you know, our last edition, we had Sandra Rhodes. And I'm like, wow.
Wow.
I'm no Sandra Rhodes. I'm not anyone remotely famous. But, you know, it was, to me, it indicated that there was an appeal there to people. So that really started the journey, I think, Harper's Bazaar, because anyone who gets into this kind of interiors game, particularly on Instagram, once one magazine features you, suddenly the magazines start coming. Not only do the magazines start coming, the brands start coming, and the brands who want to collaborate and for you to create content. And also what happens is location agents are always looking for places for location shoots. And I was approached by a location agency. I'm actually, over the years, quite a few location agencies, but this is the one I just took notice of. And they said, have you ever thought about renting your home out as a location space? And I hadn't, because I hadn't really thought about it. And actually, it wouldn't have happened, because in my marriage, that was he would not have agreed to having people in the home. But now I didn't have to consult with anyone but myself and my daughter, and she was like, yeah, let's go for it. Can we make money? Let's go for it. Let's do it. And so it became a location house, which has been pretty good considering we started in the pandemic.
Gosh, yeah. So that's really not long, is it? That's what, 2.5 years?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah, a lot has happened over the 2.5 years. And I'm always honest in saying what has absolutely catapulted me on social media to more exposure had been the murder of George Floyd. And that's really awful to have to link those two together. But I have to be honest, is that I'm not doing, and I wasn't doing anything different than I was doing before George Floyd. I was doing all the hashtags, I was engaging in content, other people's content. But because brands and magazines had to show that they were diversifying what they did. And so, the skeptical me says that was a moment in time rather than a movement to doing something different. That certainly escalated what was happening. The algorithm suddenly changed. So there were people who would say, I love what you do. How comes I've never seen your house before on here? Like, because you could search out, but I'd never come at the top.
Yeah.
So I went from in June 2020, just before June 20, I had 500 followers, and now I have 14,000.
Wow. Yeah, that's rapid growth.
It is.
Yeah.
And I'd been on Instagram a good few years before then. And it's so funny because I was saying to my daughter, before all of the changes, everything happened, if I get to 500 by June, maybe I could do a giveaway, Maybe I could do something, follow me and, I don't know, get some special brand tea or something. I don't know. Yeah, I was thinking smaller at that point. So it's sad. It is sad that I have to equate that back.
Yeah.
Because it's not, I'm rightfully here with that 14,000. I should have been here before, but I wasn't open to that exposure before George Floyd.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember that. And there was a lot of this sudden, and in a lot of ways performative.
Yes.
Like diversify your feed and share it, and which is of course important, but it was just this flood of it, and I wonder how whether that's remained, whether that's actually
and I know for a lot of bigger influencers, they've said, look, we've seen this before, and then get a couple thousand new people, couple thousand people drop off after a few months. I mean, for me, I have to admit, it has been consistent. Which is great, which means that I think predominantly people who have come because they didn't know I existed before and they like what I do. There will of course be amongst that a minority of it was performative and no, I can take that off and stop following, but it definitely opened up my world of interiors and what I do to a much bigger audience. And to have brands like eBay come and want to not just me create the content but work with me to create the content is huge. It's huge, because I don't know if you ever have to create content, but usually it's me with my iPhone trying to get different angles and then edit it on my iPhone to get it to good quality and send it off to the brand, and this is all for like 2 stories and a post. Which I say is all for just, but actually, as you all know, takes a lot of time to do those 2 stories.
So much work.
And I don't think people necessarily appreciate that, because we can make it look quite seamless, but that can take, creating content like that can take at least a day.
Oh God, yeah.
At least a day. And then if you're working with brands, or usually PR in brands, who are not sure about what direction they really want to go and tell you one thing, and then they say, oh no, well actually, no, we don't like that. Could you do that again?
Yeah.
And doing that again doesn't just mean that's an extra 5 minutes. That means another whole day of doing that
Yeah, yeah.
again. So yeah, it's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work. I really love your account, of course, but I also like I love how you've made it. It's so fun.
Mm,
Like, you know, you because I feel like you approach it from so many different angles. Like your photos are just exquisite and beautiful,
thank you.
and so just like you know the angles, because also your house is beautiful. Also your videos and your dancing and your own personal style, the way you dress and your
Mm,
accessories. It's so visually interesting. There are so many different things to look at
mm,
because you know how often there's that thing of like consistency, and Instagram just
yeah,
essentially like wants you to share the same photo over and over again.
yeah,
Whereas
yeah,
yours is really rich and
yeah,
funny and interesting and warm. Um, so it almost feels like the Natasha show,
yeah,
which I
yeah,
love.
yeah. It's great that you see it that way because it is me. Being an interior designer and being a creative, that's me. It comes out in, of course, the interiors, but it also comes out in the music that I like and that I like to dance and that I'm very sociable, and the way that I dress. I dress like my home.
You do,
So,
yeah.
uh, and
It's
if people say that to me, that's a huge compliment to me.
yeah.
Um, and I sometimes say to clients, well, how do you dress? And sometimes how you dress actually does show that I'm very safe with dressing. I always wear black. I don't, I don't want to stick out. And then your house is very like that. So don't be surprised by that. If your house is often a reflection of who you are, unless you're copying a trend that isn't
Mm,
about you, and then you don't feel comfortable with it. So I think I started off being quite purist about, okay, let's just do photos of the house, but then people showed interest, and I do like to dance in my kitchen.
yeah.
And putting that in every now and then, people love that. They're like, "Well,
Yeah.
we haven't seen you dance in your kitchen for a while." And actually, a lot of that happened during the lockdown. And for me, because I have chronic asthma,
Hmm.
I wasn't allowed. I stuck to the rules around not going out for the first 12 weeks, which was awful.
God.
Um, so no friends or family around. My daughter was here. I didn't have my puppy then, and I just felt very, very isolated. And usually my house is a hub of activity. So
Mm.
there are parties, people playing dominoes, people dancing, people eating. And I had none of that. Suddenly I was cut off from all of that. So
Hmm.
dancing in my kitchen is something I would have done anyway, but I was just doing it by myself.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing
So
that with us.
yeah.
Thank you for sharing it because I think it's brought a lot of people a lot of joy.
It's brought me joy. I know. It doesn't bring my daughter joy. She's like, my friends follow you, right? I'm like, it's just like, oh, please, please don't do the dancing. Please don't put up a. I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm just gonna tell you now. I'm gonna put up another dancing video. Oh God. Ah. Well, what is my worth as a mother, not in life, but to embarrass my child from time to time? That's what we live for, right? As they get older, they're like, oh, God,
Absolutely.
they go from, I don't know if your children are still like that, they want to sing and dance with you at a
Yeah.
certain age. And then they get to a certain age, you're like, come, and you don't know where they are, and they're hiding because suddenly they're mortified. You want to dance or sing with them.
Yeah, my little one still absolutely like he would dance with me all day long if
Lovely
he
age,
could.
lovely age.
Yeah, and so I am relishing this as much as possible because I know that that's going to change soon. But
Yeah,
yeah, I love it. No, we did a lot of dancing in the kitchen during lockdown.
yeah. It's the
Um,
best place to dance, I
it
feel
absolutely is, and
personally.
the kitchen at parties. That's where
That's where the
that's where
parties are.
exactly that's where it all happens.
Yeah. So to me it makes absolute sense. And in terms of my home anyway, everyone gravitates to the kitchen.
Yeah, yeah.
Even for the longest time after we had the kitchen done, because it was extended out,
Mm,
I never went into the living room at all. I'd work from here,
yeah,
have meetings here. We
yeah.
even had a pop-up shop here,
Oh, wow.
cook here. So it really is the heart of the house in terms of its functionality.
And it has that incredible yellow floor,
Yeah.
which feels like a hearth almost.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
it's where the fire of the house is, the light.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. It's and here's a funny story. I didn't know that I liked yellow.
Hmm.
Honestly, I didn't know that I liked yellow. I thought green, definitely I love green. I've always said green is one of my favorite colors. And I don't know how I've been kidding myself because I look around the house and there are accents of yellow absolutely everywhere.
Wow.
And this floor is the biggest statement of it. And when I first went to pick a floor, I was looking at green.
Hmm.
And I was considering it's a rubber floor. And the company that I went to had lots of different colors and they had this yellow. And I was like, oh my gosh. Oh, I'd never considered yellow. And then I got the sample through and I was like, I think it's going to have to be yellow. And I've never regretted it, but I had no idea that I liked yellow, yellow before then.
So you decided to confirm your love of yellow with the biggest surface area in your
The,
house.
the literally the biggest surface area in the house. It's not even something you can hide. It's very obviously there, but it is very warm. It's warm underfoot anyway, but just the color. And
Mm,
before this room was renovated, it was a very cold, narrow, dark room. So we never, contrary to what I said about spending most of the time in the kitchen,
mm,
in the old days, you came into, it was purely functional. Needed to make a cup of tea, needed to make dinner. I think let's just eat it in the living room because it was just cold and dark.
hmm.
So I wanted a lot of light. So I did that, created lots of light there's lots of windows all
Yeah.
over the room. But definitely, even on a day where it's very dull outside, this room still feels bright because of the floor.
Wow.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to paint our floor yellow because we have a very
Do you know
gloomy
what I say?
kitchen.
Go for it. Go for it. People are like, I could never. That's the thing that always makes me laugh. People are like, I could never do what you've done. I said, yes, you could. So no, I said the cheapest way to do things is with paint because
Yeah.
you don't have to spend loads of money on paint. And if you don't like it, you paint over
You
it.
paint over it.
It's
So
such a,
true.
it's so simple
Yeah.
to do that. Start with, yes, it doesn't have to, don't do something like I've done if you're not sure about color, because it's a very expensive mistake to make. But paint, you could paint the floor. I've painted the floors in my bathroom and in my bedroom. I painted floors.
Hmm. Hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah, it's tempting. It's definitely tempting. So are you now, so how is your work working? How is your work now? Are you working as a consultant? Are you doing working in interiors as well as I know that you've got
Yeah.
the location house
Yeah.
work as well, which I imagine must take up quite a lot of time as well, and
I'm doing all of
energy.
the above.
Wow.
I am doing all of the above. Plus, added to that, now I do content creation, which was never on my list of things to do at all. But again, through Instagram, you know, I've made money from brands asking me to create content. I don't say that it's my favorite thing in the world to do.
Hmm.
But I think the more I become, again, I'm learning new skills. So the more I become quicker at knowing how to edit and the best kind of editing apps and, you know,
Hmm.
invested in like a light ring and a stand for my iPad, sorry, iPhone, it's made such a difference. Before it was very labor intensive, and the more I try different things with reels, the more confident I become with it.
Yeah.
But it wasn't the most favorite thing that I do. So I'm about to launch my website, so people should look out for that in the next month or so, which is all about me as an interior designer, but also about the location house and about brand collaborations as well. So I think I will always be a bit of all of those things now.
Yeah.
And I'm quite happy with juggling all of that. I think eventually, in terms of the diversity work, I will do less of that
Hmm.
because my calling, I feel, is to be, I will always be, you know, fighting for justice,
Hmm.
but it doesn't necessarily have to be my day job
Yeah.
constantly. And there's a lot of burnout I had a lot of burnout last year from talking about race and facilitating conversations, and I realized I just needed to move away from that for a little while.
Yeah.
So I think eventually, as my therapist has said to me, you need to concentrate on your interiors. So that's the aim,
Yeah.
is moving towards that, definitely.
Yeah. And it feels very clear. It kind of feels like there's no other option. It's
No,
so glaringly obvious.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it is. And I have to stop feeling a bit like an imposter in the room around that, you know?
And why do you think you feel like an imposter?
I
Do you think
think,
sorry,
sorry.
no, you carry on. I don't want to put words into your mouth. Carry on.
So I think it's because, I think partly because I've not had formal training around it, but then I have a chat with myself and say all the formal training in the world doesn't mean that innately makes you a creative person. There are lots of creative people that are self-taught around, their artistry, their creativity, because it's something I feel is innate. So there are things that I could do, maybe technically, that I could learn a bit more about, but I have done quite a few projects, interior design projects, so it's not that I can't do that. So that's the talk to myself around, you don't have to have a certificate
Yeah.
to call yourself an interior designer. I think the other is the imposter syndrome is because I'm not giving it enough energy.
Okay.
So I've been approached by a few people, and I know I've self-sabotaged on jobs that people have come to me for, kind of put them off, which is terrible to admit, but I know I've done that. Maybe there's a fear of failing.
Yeah.
Maybe there is this imposter syndrome that says you think you're good at this, you're not really.
Yeah.
It's bizarre, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I think there's all of those things together that has stopped me doing it. And I know I'm bloody brilliant at it.
Yeah.
And my mind is always creative, ticking creatively. And I constantly get friends and acquaintances send me messages saying, I've thought about doing blah, 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 but I don't know how to do so. So again, this problem solving aspect,
Yeah.
I want to put this in the garden, but I'm not sure about what would you do with blah, 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 or I've got these 3 different colors. So I'm doing it anyway. I'm just not getting paid for it.
Yeah. Yeah. It nearly every single woman I've spoken to for the podcast and just in life have expressed some type of imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And I think I can definitely relate to the not having formal training, because I think that was what I have felt for a long time as an illustrator. I've drawn my whole life, and written my whole life, but I didn't train as an illustrator, as a writer. And I was just thinking about my mum, actually, because my mum worked as for most of my time growing up, she was an interior designer. And she didn't study. She didn't have any formal training. She'd been to art school, but kind of similar to you, she just kind of fell into it. She did her own house. I think she painted her floor leopard print one time.
Wow.
I know it took a long time. And she, friends would ask her to do it, and she just kind of found her way through it then, and ended up, getting a lot of big jobs. But it's, what is this kind of fixation that we have on having a certificate and knowing the rules?
Yes.
Whereas in a
Yes.
way, if you can kind of just find your way through it, and you need to develop skills, but you can in a way do it with so much more freedom, I think,
Yeah.
than if you've been taught. And this is not to say that there's no value in education and in creative education. I think there is, but I think there are different ways of arriving at where you need to be.
Yeah.
And in some
Yeah.
way, and like everything that you've described, it sounds like it's just, your creative brain has just developed, and like you said, problem solving and your approach. You have all of that. You have everything.
Yeah. It's that constantly, I started to also rethink education when my daughter, who is academically very, very brilliant, decided she didn't want to follow academia. And that was a major shock to me, because again, I think my kind of old school brain was, and I always said this to her from a child, is, of course, you go to school, and then after secondary school, you stay on or go to sixth form, and then you go to university. That's it. That was trajectory. So when she said to me, she came out of her GCSEs and she'd had like all A stars and A's, well, that she didn't want to do A levels. So what? I don't want to, or I was like, so I convinced her to do them, but she dropped out of them. But she definitely wasn't going to university. Oh my God, have I failed as a parent? And then I realized I was making it all about me. And actually, it wasn't anything about the associations that we might have negative. Oh, they just don't want to do anything, just want to be at home. No, no, no. She's very successful at what she's doing and growing her own business, but in a very different way. That was her path. And so when I speak to young people now, I seriously consider what's the best path for you. There's lots of brilliant things about going to university besides the academic. It may be the first time that you're living by yourself, you're having to self-manage, the kind of social aspect to it. So there's lots of great things about that 3 or 4 years at uni. But also, if that's not for you, then that's okay. Maybe your path is different. And I feel like society is maybe coming around to that more. Perhaps because now there's no guarantee of a job at the end of a degree.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's it. It's like there's just these millions of people with incredible degrees and nowhere to go with them.
Right.
Yeah.
My best friend's daughter, her second year after uni, she's finished. I think she got a first or a 2-1, and for about a year she was cleaning. Yeah, that's not a judgment on people who clean, but you wouldn't expect to have a degree and then end up having to clean schools to make money because you can't find a job.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the reality of it. Is that it's, I don't know, maybe other professions, as I say, that you have to train to become, that might be different, but generally just saying having a generic degree is going to get you a job. Not necessarily.
Yeah. No, things are definitely changing, and I guess the internet also has a lot to do with that as well. And people have realized that they can kind of create jobs for themselves and decide, right, well, I'm going to do this. I mean, there's so much that I don't even know about that people do on the internet to make money. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think my daughter's generation, so she's 23, are very much the generation of, I'm going to do it myself.
Yeah.
I'm going to create my own business around this. Their aspiration, I think, generally is not to work for someone else.
Yeah.
It's, I mean, there's also a lot of negativity in that and pressure in that if you haven't done something by a certain age, then you failed. I'm like 23, right? You've not had any life yet. So there is that negative aspect of social media showing you that all of these young people making money out of seemingly doing nothing. But there is also the other positive side about young people who are working really hard to do something for themselves. And I don't think that should be discouraged.
That's such an interesting point, actually, about, because again, this is something that I'm interested in exploring in these conversations, is about this notion that unless you are super successful, whatever your definition of successful is, by the age of your early 20s or your late 20s, then that's it, you failed. And it's such a limiting, false view, because life is so long, and what's so interesting is is the journey, and there's so much ahead of you. And it's hard, isn't it? Because we are sold this idea, but the reality is we're often going to have several different careers.
Absolutely.
Within one lifetime.
Absolutely.
And so one is just, one will shift into another, and then you'll, go off on a different path. And it's about understanding that and really helping young people understand that, which of course, when you're 21, you don't want to hear that. That's not what you want to be told. But I really felt like...
I think there's a lot of pressure in society, and I'm very mindful of not saying this to like 16, when they're 16. So
Mm.
what do you want to do with life?
Mm-hmm.
Actually, what I say is, I can't imagine you'd want to know what you want to do at 16.
Yeah.
I certainly didn't know,
Yeah.
because I want to take that pressure off, thinking that suddenly you're 16, so you're sort of 1 foot in childhood and 1 foot in adulthood, and
Yeah.
you know what you want to do for the rest of your life. What?
Yeah.
And I would say, if you want to go to university, to go and do it for a subject that you're interested in learning more about,
Yeah.
not because it's going to form your career for the rest of it. I don't know that my degree, did it get me anywhere? Maybe at a time where people just wrote, you know, without any thought on job descriptions, you must have a degree.
Mm.
Didn't say what degree. Um, Maybe that may have got me through the door a bit. But
Mm-hmm.
besides that, as I say, I don't even know what it is. I don't even know what public administration is. So it's obviously never been a question in the interview. I would have failed.
Oh, brilliant.
So yeah, let the kids be kids, let the young people be young, let them dream about things, and not be judgmental if they say, "Oh, I don't want to do that
Yeah.
anymore." My goddaughter, from the age of about 5, from actually probably from the age that she could speak, said she wanted to be a teacher, has always said she wants to be a teacher. And she became a teacher. She's 26 now, and she's not loving it at all. She's
Right.
not, and it's not about the children, it's the bureaucracy
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
all of that kind of stuff, that all the additional stuff.
Yeah.
And I said to her, well, you've tried it, don't feel like you failed at anything. You've tried it and maybe it's not for you. She's like, yeah, I don't think this is for me. And for some people, they'd be horrified. They'd be like, but
Mm.
you spent 2 years extra, you did your teacher training. That doesn't disappear.
No, because she will carry that with her for whatever she continues to do.
Exactly.
And
Exactly
it will
that.
inform all of her work. And that's so sad. I was talking about this yesterday actually, about because we've been looking through the kids' work that they brought home
Uh-huh.
from school, and I was just looking at how much the teachers have to do to format it,
Yeah.
and I was just like, God, this is
Yeah.
so much, and it feels really, really tragic that people who genuinely want to teach
Yes.
are burnt out because of, yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
so
I
the
mean, she said
bureaucracy.
she constantly will work till, well, she'll stay at school to maybe 5 or 6. Then she'll come home, she'll work till midnight every day,
My God.
doing lesson plans because they have to do the lesson plans for the next day. And weekends as well. Sometimes she's having to do work on weekends. My neighbor is a teacher's assistant. She is there first thing in the morning. She's there till 5, 6 o'clock. She'll go in during the holidays. Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's, I don't think teachers or teaching staff get the credit that they deserve.
Hmm.
Or the fact that they had to hold it all together during the for 2 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
They
I
had to
know.
teach children in a very different way. They never stopped working.
Mm.
There's no
Hmm.
gratitude shown to the fact that they had to keep going, even when the government said it was safe for them to keep going, and it wasn't, but they kept going.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
No, it's absolutely makes my blood boil.
yeah,
Really does. Really, really does. But yeah, no, this is it. This is exactly what you're saying, that she, just because she's decided it's not for her, maybe, she had to do this to figure out what the next stage is.
yes,
And it's,
yes.
it's incredibly valuable skills and
And if you look at it as a positive, when you get older and you're talking to the younger generation, so you're in your 70s or your 80s, they'll be
mm,
so fascinated by, so you started as a teacher,
yeah,
and then you became a bus driver,
yeah,
and then you traveled the world, and then it's
yeah.
actually really interesting that
It
you
is.
did all these different things rather than you're quite flaky, you didn't stick at anything. I don't think anyone would see it that way, right? They'd be like,
No.
oh my gosh, you did all those different things.
Exactly, and that's what I love about these conversations that I have the privilege of having, of saying,
Yeah,
right, so you did that and then you did that. Oh my
yeah,
goodness. And often, yeah, people will come to me kind of, and start the conversation maybe feeling a bit embarrassed or sense of shame that they didn't continue with something. It's like, no, but this is actually fascinating and there
Yeah,
is so much value in your story. And I
yeah,
think that's also I really, why I wanted to start this podcast was because I wanted to, I wanted people to feel the value in their story as well,
yeah,
and that because I know that it's often it can be difficult to talk about yourself, but I think it can be so valuable for others to hear, how you've navigated life, how you've
yeah.
navigated your work, your creativity, because it makes us feel less alone, and because it makes us understand, oh yeah,
Right.
there's all these different ways of doing it. There isn't just this one way that I should have done and didn't do,
Yeah.
but I can relate to that person because that happened. And like somebody once said to me, every single podcast episode, every conversation that you have, I learn something about myself. I was like, that
Wow.
is so beautiful that through
Wow.
listening to somebody else's story, you can,
Yeah.
you can, that it can have that effect. So, like, exactly like you say, it's not, we don't think that other people are flaky. We're just really interested to hear what they've
Yeah.
done.
And the thing you said about a minute ago around, that loneliness piece, right? That I think as creatives, it can be a very lonely space because unless you're in a creative partnership with someone else, often
Mhm.
creatives are doing whatever they do by themselves.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean you don't enjoy what you do, but you might miss out on that social aspect. So to hear stories of people who are sharing similar experiences can make you feel less alone
Yeah.
or less that you're doing the wrong thing or, oh, so I went from this to this to this. Oh, but that person did something similar
Yeah.
to find out where they needed to be. So I think it's really interesting for people to hear, your podcast and hear these different stories because also there's that relatability. Ah, okay. It's not
Yeah.
just me that feels like that.
Yeah.
I had someone I follow on Instagram had a conversation. I think she's a writer, a journalist, and she was talking about being freelance and all the positivity that people talk about, but she feels so lonely,
Yeah.
so, so lonely. And she wonders if she's made the wrong choice because there are sometimes weeks where she's just been in her flat by herself because she can't afford to rent a space or a
Mm-hmm.
shared space. And what really helped her being vulnerable was so many people who came back and said, I feel the same way.
Yeah.
Don't feel bad about feeling like that. That's
Yeah.
can be quite common. And also ideas about what you can do. Because I know for me, although I've got an office at home, sometimes you just need a little bit of difference
Yeah.
around you.
Yeah.
And I think the wonderful thing for me living in London is there are so many free spaces where you
Mm-hmm.
can go and work. So you
Yeah.
don't have to pay. Hotel lobbies are brilliant.
Oh,
I had no idea that people were doing this. So you go to a really nice kind of funky boutique hotel lobby. If you see the amount of people out with their laptops, and all it might cost you potentially is a cup of coffee.
oh my
you
God, what
you could end up having a
brilliant.
conversation with someone.
Yeah.
So all sorts of, or museum cafes, or ways that you can still have that creativity around you but not feel so alone.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
definitely do that for myself because I think, yes, I have the privilege of having an office space at home, but just sometimes it's nice to
Yeah.
be somewhere different.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I'm feeling a lot of claustrophobia and cabin fever at the moment in
Yeah.
our house. And yeah, I think I've started thinking, right, okay, might be time to move to the library.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I've done that. I've done that. And the great thing I think about being a creative and being a freelancer is that you can have meetings wherever you want.
Yeah.
So I've got a client that I meet regularly, and we found this really, really amazing cafe, which is in between both of us. And it's so my style. I think I posted it on stories, just loads of plants, exposed brick, just very much me. And it really helps my creative juices in terms of
Ah,
being in
yeah.
that sort of space.
Yeah.
And she loved it too. So We can be creative about even where we work.
Yes. That's a great way of looking at it, actually.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean I have to spend money to find myself a studio or an office space.
Yeah.
It just means maybe once a week or whenever you feel like it, take yourself to breakfast.
Yeah.
Work from there.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna carry that, actually. I'm gonna take that. That's such a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, Natasha, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's been absolutely joyful talking to you and learning more about your journey and how you've arrived here and where you're going forward. It's so exciting, really exciting. I'm so happy for you. I'm so happy for you that you did take that leap, and you know, and that you say that you talked to your therapist and that you had all these excuses, and they're like, you've just got to do it. You're an amazing interior designer. You've just got to do it. And you've run with it. Yeah. And it feels like you've got wings on your heels.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's a wonderful thought. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for inviting me. It's been a really lovely conversation.
You can find Natasha on Instagram at Until Lemons Are Sweet, and do keep an eye out for her upcoming website. Thank you to Saba Lachey for sponsoring this episode. Thank you for listening to On the Irregular. Please remember to review and subscribe, as it helps other listeners find us.